Welcome back to this special edition of the show. Coming to you live from New York, we're discussing the fate of the millions of stateless Palestinian refugees, many of whom have been living in decrepit refugee camps for decades. I'm joined by Karen AbuZayd, the Commissioner-General of the United Nations Relief and Works Agency for Palestine Refugees in the Near East, known as UNRWA, which began as a temporary emergency agency and is now marking its 60th year in existence. Now, before we continue, we have the results from the instant poll that we conducted in our chat room over the break. We had asked, how would you suggest resolving the Palestinian refugee issue? Now, 24% of you said the Arab host country should grant them citizenship. 69% said Israel should allow them to return to their ancestral homes, while 5% said they should be financially compensated and simply stay where they are. And 2% of you said nothing should be done because the status quo is acceptable. Of course, it's not scientific, but that's just a view in the chat room in our poll there. Thank you for taking part with that. As we get back to questions, Ellie in the US had asked a question just before the break in the phone call, saying, what about the refugees who are outside UNRWA's or haven't taken anything from UNRWA? And I think he was discussing the people who left the lands there, perhaps the Arab lands at that time, and haven't been put into camps or haven't been any of the other Arab countries. Yes,
obviously went perhaps as refugees to somewhere else, or were taken care of by others, or just integrated somewhere else, I suppose. UNRWA's mandate, of course, is only for Palestine refugees. It was created particularly for that in 1949. And that is, we have a partial mandate in that sense, is that it's directed toward those Palestine refugees who remained in the region.
Now, your situation is made more complicated because in some places, such as Lebanon, Palestinian refugees don't really have the right to go and seek work or have any kind of equal existence opportunity. So ultimately, where does that leave them? You have generations, families, unable to really properly fend for themselves. Is there any effort made to try to create some kind of integration, or does it become too difficult?
No, it doesn't, because what has happened since 2005 with the Senora government and his willing cabinet as well is to change some of those conditions for Palestine refugees. Two things. They were allowed to seek work in many of the occupations that had been banned to them before. Plus, we were allowed to improve the living conditions in the camps. So that's made a big difference to people too. And we've seen the whole attention to Nar al-Barad after that camp was destroyed 2 years ago, is again working with the government and trying to build a model camp actually, where we will then have it become part of the region, a neighborhood, being policed by the Lebanese police rather than self-policing, all of these things. So more integrated in that sense, but not
But the shadow of the dark shadow of Nar al-Barad still remains because it never was rebuilt and the people were pretty much
left. It hasn't been rebuilt, but there are a lot of plans. Now we have a problem there because the latest obstacle is the antiquities which have been found underneath it, and there has been a court case brought against the government for allowing us to rebuild. So that has to be sorted out, but we're still quite hopeful that we will be able to do that. We've raised money to begin rebuilding. We've removed all the rubble, and we're helping the people meanwhile. But it is a long time to be in temporary shelters when you had a thriving camp before.
We've got another phone call. Tariq in DC is on the line. Tariq, what would you like to ask?
Thank you for taking my call. I had a question. What do you find the likelihood of perhaps holding both Israel and even perhaps Hamas belligerents accountable under international law? And also, what would the possibility of a one-state solution even work out better than a two-state solution, and why do or don't people advocate for that? Thank you very much.
Well, let's get the Commissioner General's view on the one-state solution first and foremost.
Yes, I don't have a personal view on that, but it certainly is something that's being discussed more and more in academia and even among, perhaps particularly among Palestinians who don't see the possibility of the two-state solution, of the viable state. And so it's out there to be discussed, but I think one has to begin thinking about all the implications that would mean.
Again, and it's not specifically your remit, but as someone who's there in the region as an observer, accountability seems to be, and this is what I think Tariq is getting at, accountability seems to be something that's often forgotten.
Mm-hmm. Yes, it's a big word with lots of definitions and lots of discussion around it, but it is what people demand, and we know that over many other kinds of conflicts around the world, that people demand justice and accountability. I think Tariq maybe is referring to the recent war in Gaza and the demands that we've now seen coming out of the Goldstone Commission, and we'll see where that goes, and hope that there will be something that people will be satisfied with it.
Now, you've lived in Gaza 9 years, and I've been to Gaza. I know what the conditions are like there. To what extent do you feel the outside world doesn't really get a true impression of what's going on there? How impoverished, how difficult, how crowded the situation is?
Well, there are two things they don't get a good impression of, both the negative and the positive, because we see that when we have people visiting. And since the Gaza war, we've even had a lot of American senators and congressmen coming to Gaza. And first of all, they're quite shocked, but also they begin to understand what really the situation is, who's really the victim, and what needs to be done about it. And we have a lot more friends, I would say, in Congress than we used to, because people hadn't any idea. On the other hand, you see that's what you see, the destruction and so on, and all the bad things that you see in the news and on the television, but you don't see all the positive things that the people are doing too, like our summer games, the UNRWA summer games, where the children have now entered the Guinness World Book of Records by having the most kites flying at one time, over 3,000, and you know, that's how people try to make their lives as normal as possible, and especially, as I say, always for the children, and they just keep coming back, and their resilience is something everyone talks about.
Before I take another question from a viewer on the phone, let me ask you about this making friends in Congress, as you mentioned here just now. To some degree, UNRWA was actually targeted quite a bit by some of those in America, some in government, who were saying that it hires people from Hamas, which obviously is not in favor with the U.S. government, that it supports terrorists. How do you get around these?
Well, partly by having people come and visit and going back and telling the story about what's really going on and who works for us and how they work and what they think about and so on. But also, it's a constant struggle, and it won't be an easy one to get over. But that's why we hope that the change in the administration might help us with the mood and so on, and allow people to come and see and to know what we're doing and how we're doing it and what the Palestinian people themselves think and how good and decent they are.
Well, let's get Eleanor on the line from Italy. Eleanor, what would you like to ask?
My question to Karen is, many of us believe that raising the consciousness of the world about the Palestinian problem is the solution. What I want to ask is, what can we do? What can every one of us do to raise that consciousness so people would understand, especially in the United States of America? Because the Europeans, they understand, they see more of the two sides, but especially in the United States, what can we all do? Because this is an injustice to go over 60 years.
Okay.
People in tents.
Eleanor, thank you. Thank you for that. Eleanor, thank you. Let's get that. Actually, it's true. I mean, and certainly Europe is a little closer to the story. But what can be done to raise the awareness, particularly to the U.S.?
Well, I guess as much publicity as possible, lots of networking, the kinds of things we're doing right now, and just our high-level event is a little inroad into that. I think there's a lot more publicity about what's going on in Palestine that people just don't pick up on so much. I mean, because there's a large group of reporters there in Gaza, in the OPT generally. The story is there, both the analysis of it and the feature stories. And maybe people have just seen too much over 60 years, and we just have to mobilize people more. I think there are some groups in the United States that are doing that very well now, like Americans for Peace Now, like J Street, especially around Washington. And we need to move that around the United States so that other areas, like where I'm from, Chicago, would get a little more understanding too. Well, we'll be trying to do that.
Getting away, I guess, from the sort of mentality of seeing it just as a place of conflict as well.
Yes, exactly. That's what I want them to see, the positive side, and
Now, it's interesting. I mean, you still also have the difficulty of functioning when conditions are so bad. You lost about 80 facilities, I think, in Gaza during around the winter time.
No, we lost our big warehouse with all of our supplies for the next 6 months. But we had about 37 schools and 11 clinics that were damaged, but not seriously. We've been able to fix them up. We would have them functioning immediately.
Although Gaza in general has had quite a lot of restriction in terms of getting in supplies.
No materials have come in, so that which is destroyed seriously is still destroyed. There are no materials allowed in, and people are still living in rubble and in their plastic tents and in rented accommodation, and it's going to be very nasty soon because the winter is coming and the rains are coming. So yeah, there's a big problem with that, which has been destroyed seriously in the war.
Even before UNRWA, you worked with the UNHCR, the Commissioner for Refugees as well. You know the situation around the world when it comes to refugees. How does the Palestinian one compare? I mean, in what sense is it unique? Why isn't it under the UNHCR umbrella, for example?
Well, UNRWA was created first to take care of this group of refugees. And so then when UNHCR was created, it exempted the Palestinian refugees. They stayed under UNRWA. And of course, the long-standingness of it is different from others. and the kinds of services that are provided to them, just the way the mandate was set up and how it evolved over time to provide these basic services. And of course, we're dealing with periodic emergencies in some parts of where we work, but we're also dealing, for example, in Syria and Lebanon, with stable refugee populations who are well looked after by the host, well treated, have all the opportunities they need, and you don't hear about them because they are doing so well.
Now, it's a shame, we're saying, 60 years in existence for a temporary agency. I guess it's fair to say everyone hopes that perhaps it will become redundant within the next 60 years and that you don't have to come back.
Next few years, I hope. Yeah.
But Karen AbuZayd, I want to thank you very much for spending the time out. Congratulations on becoming a grandmother as well. I know that's an important part of your life now as you come to the end of your time at the agency. Thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. And thank you for being with us. Remember, you can follow me on Facebook and get updates on our show topics. Be sure to add your questions and comments. We'll do our best to include them in the program. You'll also find videos made exclusively on my Facebook page there. Now, all this week we're in New York, where we're looking at some of the most pressing political, military and humanitarian issues facing world leaders as they gather for the annual UN General Assembly meetings. That's it from me and the team here and in Washington, D.C. We'll see you next time.